The night the rich kid who tried to drown me ended up screaming in his own piranha pond, I had to decide whether to let him die or pull him out. Yeah, that really happened. So let me ask you right from the start. If it were you standing on that muddy bank, watching the person who tried to kill you get torn apart by his own trap, what would you have done? My name is Ebony Freeman, and this is not some movie script or urban legend. This is the story of how a poor black scholarship girl from the swamp took on one of the richest families in Louisiana, how the town tried to bury me, and how the bully who once called me trash ended up testifying against his own father in federal court. You know that feeling when you walk into a place and you can practically hear it saying, "You don't belong here." That was St. Jude High for me. Picture this: marble floors in the lobby, trophies in glass cases, kids stepping out of luxury cars like it's a fashion show, and then me climbing out of a rusted 1990 Ford F-150 that coughs every time you turn the key. I was there on a scholarship, the kind they put on brochures when they want to brag about opportunity and diversity. But trust me, the only diversity they really liked was on paper. My dad, Sergeant Arthur Freeman, United States Marine Corps, retired and stuck in a wheelchair called St. Jude Friendly Enemy Territory. He'd say, "Walk like you own it anyway, kid. Just remember, you're not there to be liked. You're there to win." So that's what I tried to do. Keep my head down, get my grades, go home, help him with his meds. Work odd jobs to Pete. And then there was Connor Anderson. If St. Jude was a kingdom, Connor was the crown prince. Tall, handsome in that sharp way that makes adults say, "Future leader expensive, everything." Last name stamped on half the buildings in town. His dad, Richard Anderson, basically owned half the parish. Real estate factories, donations, politicians in his pocket, the whole package. People didn't just fear Connor because of who he was. They feared him because of who his father was. You crossed him. You weren't just dealing with a spoiled teenager. You were poking the bear that owned the cage. The day it really started, the air felt like soup heavy with Louisiana humidity. I was at the far edge of the courtyard, sitting alone at this old, splintered picnic table, eating a peanut butter sandwich my dad and I had split that morning, watching the social jungle do its thing. That's when I heard it, a yelp, high, sharp, full of pain. I looked up and saw a dog, old mangy ribs sticking out fur patchy, pressed against the brick wall by the gym. It was trying to scramble away, but there was nowhere to go. In front of it stood Connor, surrounded by his usual orbit of friends, holding a jagged rock like he was warming up for a pitch. "Did you get that?" he asked the boy filming beside him. "Got it, boss," the kid said, iPhone steady. "This is gonna blow up on TikTok. Do it again." Connor smiled that thin, predatory smile people loved until it turned on them. He tossed the rock up once, then hurled it at the dog. It hit with a crack that made my stomach twist. The dog screamed this awful broken sound, then collapsed, shaking. And the courtyard laughed. Not everyone, to be fair. Some kids just stared at their phones. Some turned their backs, because that's what people do when they're scared. They pretend they don't see. But not one person stepped in. My body moved before my brain did. I pushed away from this picnic table and started walking. I didn't run, didn't shout. Just walked. Boots hitting the concrete, in this slow, steady rhythm that cut through the noise. I could feel eyes on me, that weird hush, passing through the crowd, like when a storm cloud rolls over the sun. Connor wound up for another throw, aiming for the dog's head this time. And in that split second, I remember thinking, if I don't move, nobody will. He threw. I stepped between him and the dog. The rock slammed into my shoulder so hard, I heard it this dull crack that sent pain shooting down my arm and across my chest. Gasps broke out all around us. Phones lowered a couple inches. Laughter choked off. I stayed standing. The dog was behind me, pressed against my legs, shaking so hard I could feel every bone. I kept my back to him and stared at Connor. He looked me up and down, taking in the faded jacket, the scuffed boots, the thrift store backpack, all the little details. Screamed doesn't belong here. Well, look at this, he said, raising his voice for the camera. The scholarship girl thinks she's a hero. You want a treat, Freeman? Or are you just confused about where you belong? His friend snickered, but it sounded nervous now, jagged. I didn't look at them. I didn't look at the phones. I just looked into his eyes. Animals attack when they're cornered, I said quietly. They fight to survive. You attack because you're bored. You hurt things because it makes you feel big. That makes you worse than an animal. That makes you a monster. The word hung there. Monster. Something flickered in his face, that tiny twist people get when they see themselves naked for a second. His cheeks turned this ugly, blotchy red, and his jaw clenched. And then I did the most disrespectful thing I could have done. I turned my back on him. I bent down, scooped up that trembling dog, held him against my chest, and walked away. My shoulder was on fire. The courtyard was dead silent, but I kept walking toward the nurse's office, boots hitting the ground in that same steady rhythm. Behind me, I heard someone mutter, "Holy crap," and someone else whisper he's dead, like they were already RSVPing to my funeral. Later, as the courtyard started buzzing again, I heard Connor's voice under the noise, low and shaking with rage. "You're dead, Freeman," he said. "You just don't know it yet. If you've ever embarrassed a narcissist in public, you know that's not just a line, that's a promise." The real punishment came after school. The sun was brutal, baking the asphalt, making the air shimmer. I walked to the far corner of the lot, where the teachers parked, doing that mental checklist in my head. Get home, check on Dad, make sure he took his meds, maybe fix something small on the truck if I had time. Then I saw it, our Ford F-150. My dad's pride and joy sitting on its rims. All 4 tires shredded rubber hanging in strips like peeled skin. Neon orange spray paint slashed across the windshield in big uneven letters. Trash. For a second I couldn't breathe. That truck wasn't just a vehicle. It was how my dad got to his VA appointments, how we hauled scrap to pay the electric bill, how we picked up donated furniture when somebody from church called. It was his legs. It was our lifeline. I stood there, jaw clenched, while laughter floated over from a few cars away. Connor leaned on a spotless white Range Rover, iced coffee in hand. Sunglasses on, watching me like he was waiting for the show to start. He raised his cup in a little mock toast. I didn't give him what he wanted. No screaming, no crying, no begging. Instead, I spun around and marched back inside, straight to Principal Miller's office. His office smelled like lemon polish and money. Mahogany desk, gold pen-framed degrees, everything clean and expensive. He looked up at me like he'd been expecting this, and was already tired of it. "My tires were slashed," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Our windshield was spray-painted. Connor Anderson and his friends were standing right there." He sighed, leaned back, and steepled his fingers like he was about to give a TED Talk. "I checked the security feed before you came in," he said. "Camera covering that corner has been malfunctioning for a week. We have no footage." "The camera worked yesterday," I said. "You know it did." He shrugged this little half-smile that never reached his eyes. "And let's be realistic," he went on. "That truck is very old. Tires blow out in this heat all the time. As for the paint, well, without proof, it's just a tragic prank." "A prank," I repeated. It tasted bitter. "That truck is how my dad gets to the VA. This isn't a prank. This is a crime." His face changed then, just a little, like a mask slipping. "Watch your tone, Ms. Freeman. You are here on a scholarship. That scholarship requires good behavioral standing. Accusing the son of our biggest donor without evidence, that sounds like a behavioral issue to me." There it was, the line in the sand. Money on one side, me on the other. I thanked him because that's what you do when the person across the desk can pull your future out of a filing cabinet and shred it, and I walked back out into the heat. The parking lot hadn't emptied. People were hanging around pretending to chat, but really, they were waiting to see what I'd do in front of my wrecked truck. Connor watched, sipping his iced coffee, that small smirk on his face like this was all a game. I walked to the back of the truck, pulled the heavy toolbox from the bed, and dropped it on the pavement. The metal burned my fingers. I opened it, yanked out the jack, the lug wrench, all the tools we barely kept together. I got down on my knees in that heat and started changing the tires myself. Sweat running down my back, shoulder still aching from his rock. Kids watched. Some whispered. Nobody helped. Nobody told me to stop. When I was done, I threw the tools back into the bed with a crash, climbed into the driver's seat, turned the key, and let the engine roar like a wounded animal refusing to die. I drove past the Range Rover without even looking over. In my rearview mirror, I saw him crushing that coffee cup so hard the plastic buckled and spilled down his expensive khakis. He'd tried to make me look small and powerless. Instead, I'd turned his little act of cruelty into a show of strength. And nothing eats at a bully like failing to break you. But here's the thing, I only saw my side of the story then. I didn't know what was happening inside his house behind that tall iron gate and those clean white pillars. I found out later that while I was changing those tires in the sun, Connor was standing in his father's library shaking. Picture it. Walls lined with leather-bound books. Nobody reads a desk as big as a dining table. Thick carpet so soft, it feels wrong to walk on it with shoes. Richard Anderson behind the desk, glass of scotch in one hand, Connor's report card in the other, a B in calculus. Richard said quiet, smooth, terrifying. Andersons are not mediocre. Andersons lead. Connor tried to explain about the curve, about the teacher, about anything, but Richard cut him off with a single look, that kind of look that could freeze lava. Excuses are for poor people, he said. Then he unbuckled his belt. He slid it out of the loops slow, like he wanted the sound to sink in. The heavy silver buckle clinked against the desk. He told his son to turn around. And because that's what happens in those houses where power looks like love and pain looks like discipline. Connor obeyed. The leather struck his thigh once, then again, and when Richard's arm swung a little wide, the buckle slashed into Connor's calf. Deep, ugly. He went to school the next day with the wound hidden under expensive fabric. His leg throbbing with every step, his heart full of rage, with nowhere safe to put it. So he decided to put it on me. Between second and third period, I was heading toward the science wing, hugging my books tight, thinking about labs and homework, not ambushes. The hallway emptied for a moment, that weird little dead space between bells, when nobody's around. That's when two of Connor's linebacker friends grabbed me, one on each side. They lifted me off my feet like I weighed nothing and dragged me backward. My books crashed to the floor, pages splaying everywhere. Before I could twist free, they shoved me through the door of the boys' bathroom and slammed it shut. The smell hit first. Bleach old urine, that sour dampness of a place nobody really cleans right. The door lock clicked behind me. Connor limped and face-twisted, eyes wild in a way I recognized. I'd seen that kind of look in some of the guys at the VA when my dad rolled in. People who were full of pain and had no idea where to put it, except into someone else. You think you're tough, he snarled. You think you can embarrass me in front of my school? Let me go, I said. My voice came out harder than I expected. He laughed, but it was this hollow sound with no real joy in it. You need to learn your place, he said. My tire rubber isn't good enough for you. Fine. Get on your knees, lick the dirt off my shoe. Do it, and maybe I let you walk out of here. I stared at him. Not at the linebackers. Not at the door, at him. I would rather die, I said. His face twisted like I'd slapped him. He stepped closer, towering over me. "There's no camera here, Ebony," he whispered. "No witnesses. Just us." He pulled a small key from his pocket and twisted the deadbolt with a loud final click. Then he swung, big, arrogant backhand, full of all the anger his father had carved into his skin. Here's something not many people at that school knew about me. My father didn't raise me to be prey. He might have been in a wheelchair now, spine full of shrapnel. But before that, he was a gunnery sergeant in the United States Marine Corps, and he taught his daughter that the world is not always fair, and not everyone fighting you is playing by the rules. I didn't flinch. I ducked under his arm, just as his hand cut through the air where my face had been, grabbed his wrist with both hands, and twisted. His momentum carried him forward, and his body panicked leg, trying to catch up. But that injured calf betraying him. I slammed my boot into the side of his knee and felt it give out. He crashed onto the tile. Before his two friends could react, I dropped my weight onto his chest, slid my forearm across his throat, and leaned down. Everything in the room went quiet. Those two linebackers, big and solid, and used to people shrinking when they walked in, just froze, mouths open, eyes wide. They were expecting a victim, a girl crying in a corner. Instead, they were looking at a trained fighter who had decided not to take their abuse. Connor clawed at my arm, face turning red. I could have dropped more weight, choked him out completely. Instead, I held just enough pressure to remind him that I could. "My father is a gunnery sergeant in the Marines," I murmured, so only he could hear. "He didn't teach me how to bake cookies. He taught me how to snap a trachea before I could ride a bike. Yesterday, I didn't fight you because I was scared. I didn't fight you because he taught me discipline. I held back because I didn't want to disappoint him by hurting a civilian." I pressed down just a little, watched his eyes go wide, then loosened up so he could suck in a breath. "But you're not acting like a civilian right now, Connor. You are a threat. If you ever put your hands on me again, I won't stop at this. I will break you." Then I pushed off at him. Stood up, wiped my jacket with one hand, like there was dust on it, picked up my books, and walked out. The linebacker stepped aside without a word. In that bathroom, something important shifted. He finally understood he couldn't win against me physically. And people like him, when they can't win one way, they find another. You still with me so far? Because this is where things go from high school drama to something much darker. One night, not long after the bathroom incident, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, then saw the picture. A hand holding a bronze cross with an eagle in the center, dangling it over the rippling water. My dad's Distinguished Service Cross. The medal he kept in a velvet box on the mantel, the one he polished on bad days when his pain was too much, and he needed to remember that it had meant something. Under the picture, 4 words: "Come get it, or swim." I walked into the living room, heart pounding. The velvet box was open. Empty. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I grabbed my keys. The Anderson estate that night looked like a magazine spread. Lawn full of expensive cars, kids in gowns and suits, fairy lights in the trees, music shaking the ground. A charity gala, of course, because what says reputation better than raising money in public while you destroy lives in private? I drove that battered truck right past the valet, waving his arms, and parked on the grass. People stared like I'd dragged a tractor into a wedding. I got out, shoulders squared, and headed around back, following the bass and the voices, until I reached the pond. This wasn't some cute little backyard koi pond. It was huge, black, lined with rocks, artificial, but deep enough to swallow a person whole. There was a sign that said, "Danger live feeding only." Most people thought it was a joke. They were wrong. Connor stood on a raised stone platform at the edge, wearing a linen suit, holding a champagne glass in one hand, and my father's medal in the other, basking in the attention of a crowd that believed they were untouchable. When he saw me walking up in my thrift store jacket and scuffed boots, his smile stretched wide, but it never touched his eyes. "She made it." He shouted loud enough to cut through the music. Heads turned, whispers started. The scholarship girl at the rich kid's party walking straight toward the boy who wanted her gone. "Give it to me," I said. My voice felt like a rope I had to hold on to stay steady. He dangled the medal by its ribbon, letting the bronze catch the moving lights. "This old thing," he said. "My dad says this is for heroes. But your dad lives on my dad's tax dollars. I don't think he needs it anymore." "Connor, don't," I warned, taking a step closer. "Stay there," he snapped. "One more step and it's gone." He bowed and looked at the pond, then back at me, and his voice dropped a little. "You know what's in here?" he asked. "Red-bellied piranhas, imported from Brazil. Breeding season. They're hungry. They eat anything that hits the surface." The crowd laughed because rich kids think they're invincible, and everything is a joke until it isn't. "You wouldn't," I said. "Watch me," he whispered. He didn't just let go. He threw it a quick flick of his wrist, sending that metal arcing out toward the darkest part of the pond. My body didn't consult me. It just moved. I sprinted to the edge and dove, fingers reaching for the ribbon heart in my throat. For a split second, my hand brushed empty air. Then the water swallowed me whole. It was shockingly cold, heavy, muffling every sound except the thud of bass somewhere distant. Darkness wrapped around me, and my instinct screamed, "Kick Thrash, get back to the surface now." And then I heard my father's voice in my head, as clear as if he'd been in the water beside me. "Panic is a dinner bell. In the wild, prey runs. Predators wait." I forced my arms and legs still. My lungs burned. Little silver shadows flickered in the murky water, moving fast. They brushed my skin, tasting, searching for the vibrations of prey in distress. I let myself float limp like a log. The piranhas circled confused, then drifted back, losing interest. No thrashing, no bubbles, no frantic motion, no food. Somewhere above and behind me, there was light and noise. Somewhere to my left, I could just make out twisted cypress roots reaching into the water like a ladder. Slowly, carefully, I moved toward them, every movement controlled. My fingers found rough wood, then another grip, then another. I hauled myself up, breaking the surface in the deep shadow beneath the platform, and took the quietest breath of my life. Up on the stone, voices overlapped, nervous now. "Where is she? Maybe she sank. Do you think she can swim?" Connor leaned over the edge, peering into the darkness, hunting for a body, for blood, for proof that he'd erased his problem. He never turned around. I crawled onto the muddy bank, dripping clothes, heavy hair plastered to my face, and stood. The rage in me felt like ice, not fire cold, and focused. My eyes landed on a piece of driftwood, solid, waterlogged, heavy. I picked it up. Connor turned his back to the pond and faced his crowd again, arms wide like some kind of twisted ringmaster. "See?" He called out, a tremor in his laugh. "Trash sinks. That's just physics." I walked out of the shadows. Water dripped from my jacket. My boots squelched in the mud, but I moved fast and silent. I crossed the distance between us in 3 long steps, and before anyone had time to gasp, I swung the driftwood like a bat. It connected with the back of his right calf, right over the fresh wound from his father's belt. The sound was awful. Connor screamed, and his leg collapsed under him. He pitched forward, arms flailing, fingers clawing at air that couldn't save him. And then he was gone over the edge, into the same black water he'd tried to bury me in. He hit the surface in a chaotic, thrashing mess, arms and legs beating the pond in wild panic. For a second, the crowd cheered, thinking it was still a joke, still part of whatever show they thought they were watching. Then the blood appeared. The blow had ripped his half-healed wound wide open. Dark red clouded the water around him, swirling like smoke. The piranhas smelled it instantly. The water exploded. He went under with a gurgling scream, came back up with eyes bulging, mouth open in a howl, that cut through the music and the laughter and struck something primal in everyone watching. "Help me!" he shrieked, arms flailing. "Something's biting me. Oh God, something's—" He went under again, and this time, the surface boiled silver flashes, darting foam turning pink. On the patio above, the same kids who had laughed when they thought I was dying now stood frozen phones, still up, faces white. Some of them started crying. Some turned away. But none of them moved. I stood near the bank chest, heaving mud, tucking at my boots, watching the boy who had tried to kill me get torn apart by his own cruelty. Every part of me that hurt, the shoulder, the back, the humiliation, the slashed tires, the empty velvet box, wanted me to turn around and walk away. Get in the truck, drive home, pretend I had never seen him again. He earned this. A dark voice whispered. He chose this. Then he surfaced one more time. His face was twisted beyond recognition, eyes wide with an animal terror I had never seen on him. And he looked at me. Not at his friends, not at his father's house, not at any of the rich kids on the balcony. At me. For the first time since I'd known him, he didn't look like a prince or a monster. He looked like a boy who had finally realized that nothing his father owned could save him from the consequences of his own actions. And I heard my father's voice steady and heavy in the back of my mind. "Marines don't leave people behind, kid, not even the enemy." I dropped the driftwood and grabbed the thick rope coiled around a decorative post by the dock, wrapped it around my arm to anchor myself. "Connor," I shouted. My voice cut through his screams with a different kind of power. "Stop moving. Play dead." Right now, he was half delirious, but something in my tone sliced through the panic. He went still, floating on his back, sobbing, trying not to thrash. The water around him calmed just enough. The frenzy slowed. The fish, confused by the sudden lack of frantic motion, circled, hesitated. I swung the knotted end of the rope out over the water as hard as I could. It smacked across his chest. "Grab it!" I yelled. "Wrap it around your wrist and don't let go." He fumbled with bloody hands, fingers slipping, but managed to loop it twice around his forearm, clinging to it like it was the only thing keeping him tethered to life. I ran the rope around a nearby cypress trunk, dug my heels into the slick mud, and leaned back with everything I had. The rope burned my palms raw, my muscles screamed, but inch by inch I dragged him out of that churning black. With one final heave, he slid up onto the bank, coughing, gagging legs, shredded suit in tatters. The estate went silent. Even the DJ had killed the music. All you could hear was Connor wheezing the wind in the trees, and somewhere in the distance the faint wail of sirens. He rolled onto his back. The piranhas had torn his pants from mid-thigh, down calves, mauled blood soaking into the grass. I leaned in, trying to see if I needed to apply pressure, maybe a tourniquet. That's when I saw them, not the bite marks, the marks above them, parallel lines, old and new, wrapping his upper thighs and disappearing under his shirt to his lower back. Some silver and faded, some purple and swollen, some fresh and angry red. Belt marks, buckle marks. I'd seen scars like that at the VA on men who never talked about their childhoods, only about the wars that came later. The realization hit me like someone had punched me in the chest. The cruelty he poured into the world, the need to control, to make people small, to hurt before he could be hurt. It had started right here on that skin in that house. He saw me looking, and something inside him shattered. He tried to pull the shredded fabric over his scars, hands shaking too hard to do much of anything. "Don't look at me," he sobbed, voice climbing into this high panicked register I had never heard from him. "Don't look, just don't look, please." He curled in on himself like a wounded animal, not from the fish, but from the shame. On the balcony, the rich kids who had idolized him couldn't see the scars from that distance, but they could hear the change in his voice, and sometimes that's worse. Blue and red lights began flashing off the windows of the big white mansion. Sirens grew louder. Paramedics rushed in with a stretcher, pushed me aside, started cutting away what was left of his clothes. He flinched at their scissors, not just from pain, but from the fear of more exposure. And that's when his father finally showed up. A black sedan glided up the driveway and stopped like a shark surfacing. Richard Anderson stepped out, suit. Immaculate, jaw-tight eyes scanning the chaos with cold calculation. He did not run to his son. He straightened his cuffs, adjusted his jacket, and walked briskly toward the stretcher like a CEO striding into a boardroom. Dad Connor choked when he saw him reaching out a shaking hand. I'm sorry. Richard looked down at his shredded legs, then his tear-streaked face. His expression didn't soften. It hardened like stone settling. You are crying, he said. Voice quiet but carrying. Dad, please. The slap echoed across the lawn. His open palm cracked across Connor's face so hard, his head snapped to the side. The paramedics froze. Even the nearest police officer flinched, and then looked away. You are weak, Richard hissed, leaning over his bleeding son. You let a girl beat you. You let some fish eat you. And now you cry like a baby while the town watches. You are an embarrassment to this family. Connor's eyes went empty. He didn't say another word. Richard straightened, smoothing his jacket, then turned to Sheriff Budrow, who had finally lumbered in on the scene, already sweating through his too-tight uniform. Sheriff Richard said, pointing directly at me, standing by the cypress tree, soaked and muddy, hands still shaking. Arrest that girl. Attempted murder. She trespassed. She lured my son to the pond. She pushed him in. Look at him. That is a lie, I shouted. He stole my father's medal, threw it in the water, pushed me in, and I pulled him out. Richard did not even look at me. Do your job, Budrow, he said, or find a new one. The sheriff sighed, the sound of a man who knew exactly how many of his campaign signs had been paid for by Anderson money. He walked toward me, hand already reaching for the cuffs on his belt. Turn around, Miss Freeman, he muttered. Hands behind your back. I looked up at the balcony, at the cheerleaders, the athletes, the honor students, all the kids who had seen what really happened. Every single one of them avoided my eyes. They studied their shoes, their phones, the sky, anything but me. Really, I said. Not one of you is going to say what you saw. Not one of you is going to tell the truth. Silence is loud when it's heavy like that. The metal cuff clicked around my wrist. Stop! The voice that broke through the moment sounded like gravel sliding down a hill. It came from the shadows near the garden shed. Everyone turned. Smokey the gardener stepped into the floodlight. Bent back, stained overalls, skin dark and lined from years in the sun, left hand missing 2 fingers. The kind of man people stop seeing after a while because he's always just there, trimming hedges, cutting grass. He walked slow but straight right up to the sheriff. She didn't push him, Smokey said. I was pruning by the dock. I saw the boy throw the medal. I saw him push her in. I saw her pull him out when she could have let him die. Richard laughed dry and sharp. Go back to the shed, old man, he said. This doesn't concern the help. Smokey ignored him. He reached into his pocket and pulled out an old flip phone, the kind people joke about now. I got it right here, he said. He pressed a button and turned the tiny screen toward the sheriff. The video was shaky, the image grainy in the low light, but the audio was clear. Happy swimming! Connor's voice crackled from the speaker, followed by the splash. The screams, my orders, the rope, the grunts of effort as I pulled him out. Sheriff Budrow stared at the screen like it was a live grenade. That looks like evidence to me, Mr. Anderson, he said slowly. Richard's face turned a dangerous shade of red. Give me that phone, he snarled, stepping toward Smokey. You're fired. Get off my property. Smokey didn't flinch. Instead, he slowly rolled up his sleeve. On his forearm, faded, but unmistakable, Even under the harsh lights was an eagle globe and anchor tattoo. "I took orders for 20 years, sir," he said, voice steady. "United States Marine Corps. Served in the same battalion as Arthur Freeman. Best radio man I ever knew. Took shrapnel in his spine, saving his unit. And his daughter right there has more honor in her little finger than you got in your whole bank account. I'm not giving you this phone. This is going to the state police." The sheriff quietly unlocked the cuff on my wrist. Right there in the mud and blood and flashing lights, the battlefield shifted. For the first time, Richard's money didn't control the whole narrative. And that right there is your twist in the middle. The invisible man with the flip phone and the old tattoo just turned the entire story upside down. By the way, if you're still here, stick around because what happened next will blow your mind. You'd think that would be the end of it, right? Video proof a Marine witness, a near murder in front of half the town. Justice if I should roll in like a talda-wishing. Yeah, no. The next day, the news did what money told it to do. They ran footage of me standing over a broken Connor at the pond, but cut out the part where he stole the medal, the shove the feeding frenzy. They played a grainy bit of the bathroom fight, but only the instant where I had him on the floor, my arm against his throat. No audio of his threats. No context. "Violent scholarship student attacks air at charity gala," the anchor said, face arranged into the perfect expression of fake concern. Right on cue, my phone rang. "Principal Miller." Effective immediately, he said. "Your enrollment at St. Jude is suspended pending board review. Given the severity of the allegations and the visual evidence, I suggest you look for other educational options." He hung up before I could answer. Before I could even process that, the front window shattered. Glass flew across our living room like ice. A brick bounced off the floor and rolled to a stop against my dad's wheelchair. Wrapped around it a note in thick black marker. "Leave town or die." That's how power works when it's scared. It doesn't argue. It doesn't debate it. Terrorizes. "Dad," I whispered, picking up the brick hands shaking. "We have to go. We have to pack. They're not going to stop." My father didn't argue. He rolled over to the hallway closet, opened it, and pulled out a garment bag I hadn't seen unzipped in 10 years. His dress blues. "Help me," he said. "There's a certain sound fabric makes when it hasn't been worn for a long time. This stiff, careful rustle." I helped him out of his worn t-shirt and into the dark blue jacket, smoothed it over his shoulders, fastened the high collar, pinned the rows of ribbons to his chest. Purple Heart, Silver Star, Navy Cross. Stories he didn't like to tell. He adjusted his white cover in the hallway mirror. In that reflection, he wasn't a disabled old man who needed help up ramps. He was a Marine. "They want a war," he said, voice low and calm. "We'll give them a war. Get the keys to the truck. We're going to see the sheriff." The police station lobby smelled like stale coffee and floor wax. Deputies leaned on the counter, half paying attention, until the automatic doors swished open. My dad rolled in dress blues, pressed razor-sharp metals, glinting under fluorescent lights. I walked behind him, hands on the handles of his chair, feeling the air in the room change. Sheriff Budrow came around the desk, trying to paste authority on his face like a sticker. "Arthur," he said too loud. "I was about to send a car for your girl. We have new evidence. The video clearly shows assault, so I'm going to need Ebony to step away from the chair she's being detained for questioning regarding the attempted drowning of Connor Anderson." He unclipped his handcuffs again, letting them rattle. I let go of the chair and stepped forward, ready to put my hands out, deciding I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me beg. My father moved faster than I'd seen him move in years. He spun his wheelchair and locked the wheels, putting himself between me and the sheriff, metals catching the light. "You will step back." "Sheriff," he said, not raising his voice, but somehow filling the whole room with it. My daughter saved that boy because I taught her the code. She's here because she has honor. If you want to put chains on her for that, you go through me." Boudreaux bristled, hand dropping near his taser. "This is obstruction of justice," he said. "I have 3 deputies here, Arthur. Don't make this ugly." "It's already ugly," my dad replied. "You bought that badge with Anderson money. I bought this uniform with bone and blood." His words hung there heavy. Then the automatic doors opened again. This time it wasn't one person. It was a group. Boots on linoleum. Work boots, not polished shoes. The smell of diesel and sawdust and swamp mud drifted in before they did. Smokey led the way, still in his stained overalls, a small USMC pin on his collar now. Behind him came a one-armed mechanic, an older woman with a nurse's badge and Vietnam vet. Pin rough-handed men and women I recognized from the docks. The canning plant the truck stops. They walked in and formed a semicircle around my dad's chair and me. Smokey stepped up beside him and raised what was left of his left hand in a salute. One by one, the other veterans followed, saluting Sergeant Arthur Freeman in full-dress blues in the middle of that little parish sheriff's office. They didn't shout. They didn't chant. They just stood there silent. A wall of people who had already survived wars and were not afraid of one small-town sheriff. Boudreaux looked from my dad to them, to the deputies behind him, who were very clearly not ready to taser a group of veterans in public. He slowly reclipped the handcuffs to his belt. "Fine," he said, angry and scared all at once. "We'll review the evidence again. Take her home." But she doesn't leave town. We rolled out of there with our own personal honor guard. And for the first time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, the Anderson money didn't own absolutely everything. But remember that boy I pulled out of the pond, the one with the scars and the piranha bites, and the father who slapped him in front of everyone. His part in this story wasn't finished. A few nights later, when the house was quiet, and my dad was finally asleep, I found myself standing outside St. Jude General Hospital, heart-pounding, palms sweating, wearing a set of stolen scrubs I'd grabbed from a laundry cart by the loading dock. Connor was in the VIP wing, of course. Silk sheets, soft lighting, a private nurse, the full rich kid package. I took the service elevator up and walked down the polished hallway like I belonged there, chart in hand like any other nurse. His door was cracked. I heard voices inside. I typed the statement myself Richard was saying. "You just sign it. She trespassed. She attacked you. She pushed you in. That is the truth we are selling." "I can't," Connor said, voice thin and broken. "She pulled me out. She saved me. We control the narrative," his father snapped. "Be a man for once in your life. Destroy her, or you are no son of mine." Footsteps. The door opened wider. I slipped into a linen closet down the hall and held my breath as Richard stormed past, the smell of expensive cologne and cigar smoke trailing behind him. When the hallway went quiet again, I stepped out and walked into Connor's room. He was propped up against white pillows, legs covered in thick bandages, face bruised, eyes red-rimmed. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked small. When he saw me, he flinched so hard his IV line trembled. "Stay away," he rasped. "I'll call security." "Calm down," I said, closing the door with my foot. "If I wanted you dead, I'd have left you in the pond." He swallowed hard, watching my hands like he expected a knife. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small bundle wrapped in a paper towel. Slowly, I unfolded it. The Distinguished Service Cross glinted in the soft hospital light, still carrying a faint smell of pond water and algae. I had gone back for it after the sirens, after the chaos, after everyone had left. Dove into that black water again, feeling around in the muck until my fingers closed on the metal that meant more to my father than his own legs. I set it on the bedside tray. It landed with a solid little thud. Connor stared at it, then at me. You came here to give me this, he whispered. Why? My father told me something about honor, I said. He said it's the only thing nobody can take from you. You have to throw it away yourself. I leaned my forearms on the railing of his bed. You threw this in the water to hurt me. I went on, but you didn't hurt me. You showed me exactly who you are, and you showed yourself who you are. I don't want it, he said, tears welling in his eyes again. Take it. No, I said. I know who I am. I don't need a piece of metal to prove it. But you might need a reminder. Because the man who just walked out of here, the one who told you to lie, who beat those scars into your back, who ordered animals put in a pond for fun, he doesn't know what honor is. And if you sign what he wants you to sign, you never will either. I nodded toward the stack of papers on his table, the legal statement his father had left behind. He tried to drown you in lies, Connor. I pulled you out of the water. Decide which one you want to survive. Then I turned and walked out, heart pounding, not sure if I had just made a terrible mistake or the only move that made sense. Now here's the wild part. He chose. Later, he told me what happened after that. How he lay there, staring at the metal, the stiff paper with his father's version of the story on one side and empty space on the back. How he thought about the pond, the scars, the slap, the way his father looked at him like a broken product instead of a son. When he was strong enough to stand, he checked himself out of the hospital against medical advice. Went home and ended up outside his father's study door again. Inside, Richard was on the phone, pacing, voice sharp. I don't care about the cost, he said. The girl has the ledger. The FBI will be sniffing around the wetlands by dawn. You sanitize the site tonight. Fill the pipe with quick-dry concrete. Bury the outlet torch, any vegetation that looks burned. Blame it on lightning or campers. I don't care. Just make sure there's nothing left to find. That ledger he mentioned, yeah, I didn't tell you that part yet. During the chaos at the pond when everyone ran to the edge to watch whether I would resurface, I didn't just climb out of the water. Somewhere between pulling Connor up and the first siren, I saw the doors to his father's home office, standing wide open, lights on desk drawers, not quite closed. My dad always taught me, recon the terrain before you fight. So I slipped inside for a few seconds. In the bottom drawer of that big mahogany desk, under neat stacks of legit files, I found a black leather-bound notebook. No label. Pages filled with numbers, dates, names, payments, illegal fish imports, bribes to inspectors, chemical dumping in protected wetlands. Every crime written down in his own handwriting. I slid it into a Ziploc bag from the kitchen, tucked it into my jacket, and walked back out as the first police car pulled into the driveway. So when Richard said the girl has the ledger, he was right. And when he ordered the wetlands burned, he was trying to erase the last 10 years of his sins. Outside his study that night, Connor heard every word. He stepped on a floorboard that creaked. The voice on the phone stopped. The door swung open. Richard stood there with a drink in one hand and a cigar in the other, eyes narrowing when he saw his son listening. Eavesdropping, he said. Disgust dripping from the word. I should have known. You sneak around like a rat. You're going to burn the swamp, Connor said, voice shaking. You're going to destroy everything. I am saving this family, Richard snapped. Cleaning up a mess that exists because you were too weak to handle one scholarship girl. He stepped forward, raising his hand again. Reflex habit, the oldest pattern in their house. But this time, Connor didn't flinch. He dropped one crutch, grabbed his father's wrist mid-swing, and held it in the air. No, he said. Just that. Quiet. Final. For a second, they both froze, staring at that hand wrapped around the other. Then Connor shoved his father's arm away, turned, grabbed his crutch, and walked toward the front door. If you walk out that door, you're cut off, Richard shouted after him. You get nothing. You're a nobody. Connor didn't look back. He drove a battered old Jeep from the gardener's shed, to the edge of the bayou, pulled up at a lonely gas station, and found a payphone. One of those relics everybody forgets still exist. He fed a quarter into it and dialed a number from memory. My number. "Hello," I answered, already on edge from everything. "Don't hang up," he said. "It's Connor." I almost slammed the phone down. "They're going to burn the wetlands," he blurted. "My dad ordered a crew to pour concrete and set a fire. They're moving now. If you wait on the FBI, there'll be nothing left by morning. I know where the pipe is. I used to hunt back there. It's hidden in the cypress maze. You'll never find it alone in the dark. I can take you there." He was lying to everyone else in his life, but for the first time, he was telling the truth to me. "Why should I trust you?" I asked. There was a long pause on the line. I could hear his breathing ragged. "Because you saved my life," he said finally. "And because I'm done helping him destroy everything." We agreed to meet at an old sugar mill road. Smokey drove the flat-bottom aluminum boat. I brought the ledger and my phone. My dad called a contact. Who called a contact who knew which federal number to ring at midnight when you had environmental crimes and a crooked rich man in the same file? The swamp at 3 a.m. feels like it belongs to something other than humans. Fog curls around the cypress knees. Owls call frogs. Hum the air thick with the smell of mud plants and old secrets. "Turn left at the dead oak," Connor whispered from the middle seat, legs still hurting. Voice tight. "Outlet's about 200 yards past the bend." Smokey cut the engine, and we drifted closer. An orange glow flickered through the fog ahead, licking at the sky. We rounded the last bend, and there it was, a massive drainage pipe jutting out from the mud bank like some metal monster, vomiting thick black sludge into what should have been clear water. Dead fish floated belly up in the oily slick. Men in hazmat suits moved under portable lights, pouring quick-dry concrete into the pipe's mouth, splashing gasoline around the nearby brush. And overseeing it all, barking orders like a general in a war, he thought he was winning, stood Richard Anderson. Smokey killed the engine completely. We drifted in silent, hidden by the reeds, hearts hammering in our chests. "Now," he said. He lifted a flare gun, aimed it at the sky, and fired. A red starburst exploded above us, bathing the whole scene in harsh crimson. Every head snapped our way. I jumped onto the bank phone, up already recording. "It's all on camera," I shouted. "Step away from the pipe and drop the gas cans." "What are you doing?" one of the workers yelled. "Stopping you from going to prison with him." I shot back, keeping the lens steady on the pipe, the concrete, the gasoline. Richard's furious face. "Get them!" Richard screamed, pointing at us. "Take the phone!" A big guy in a hazmat suit sprinted toward me, shovel in his hands like a weapon. I didn't see him coming until he was almost on me, too focused on framing the shot, capturing every angle. Connor saw him. He threw his crutches aside and lunged, putting his damaged body between us. The shovel slammed into his ribs with a sickening crack. He went down hard in the mud, wheezing, but wrapped his arms around the man's leg and held on. "Run, Ebony," he gasped. "Keep filming." It's a strange thing, seeing the person who once tried to drown you take a hit meant for you instead. The word redemption sounds pretty on paper, but in real life it looks a lot like mud and blood and broken bones. Before the man could swing again, a deep thumping hit our chests. Wind whipped my hair back as a helicopter roared overhead, a spotlight carving a bright path through the fog. Federal boats surged down the main channel sirens, blaring red and blue lights, turning the cypress trunks into ghostly pillars. Agents in jackets with big yellow letters jumped out, guns drawn. Federal agents, one shouted. "Step away from the pipe." "Drop your tools." Richard spun around, eyes wide for the first time since I'd met him. He scrambled down the bank and into a sleek speedboat, fired the engine, and slammed the throttle wide open. The boat lurched forward, then choked. The engine coughed, sputtered, groaned, and died. Years of dumping sludge into his private outlet had finally clogged his own escape route. The poison he'd been feeding at the wetlands had crawled back up the pipe and strangled his last exit. He sat in that dead boat, drifting in a soup of his own making, as agents surrounded him, guns leveled at his chest. 3 months later, in a courtroom made of marble and rules, he could not pay to bend a jury, found him guilty on every count. Environmental crimes, corruption, attempted murder of a federal witness. When they brought Connor to the stand, he limped to the witness box, put his hand on the Bible, and told the truth. When the defense tried to discredit him as a bitter son, he stood unbuttoned his shirt and showed the scars on his back to the jury. My father taught me that the strong crush the weak, he said. He beat that lesson into me for 18 years. But Ebony taught me something else, that the strong protect the weak. That's the only strength that matters. My father is a weak man, and he belongs in a cage. Richard lost it. He launched himself across the table, screaming, trying to get to his son, and the marshals had to wrestle him to the floor. Whatever polished image he had left shattered in front of everyone. The judge sentenced him to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. Outside, the air felt different. Lighter, cleaner. 6 months later, the big iron gate of the estate no longer had an Anderson crest hanging from it. Instead, there was a simple wooden sign carved from cypress. Freeman and Smoky Nature Conservation Center. The pond that had once been a black pit of death now shimmered in the morning light. The piranhas were gone, removed by wildlife control. Turtles sunned on floating logs. A blue heron paced the shallows, like he'd been waiting years for the water to be safe again. One early morning, I stood at the end of the dock, watching the light change on the water, thinking about everything that had happened. Boots crunched on gravel behind me. "You leave today," I said without turning. "Bus leaves for Paris Island in an hour." Connor answered. I turned. He wore plain olive green fatigues, hair cut short, face leaner than I remembered, posture straighter. No gold watch, no designer clothes, just a young man who had chosen to walk into the fire and hope he came out better. "I wanted to see the water one last time," he said. "Clean water." We stood there a moment watching the ripples, the sunlight, the ghosts. "My father isn't solitary," he said finally. "He wrote me a letter. He blamed me, you, the judge, everybody but himself. He still thinks he's the victim. He always will," I said. "That's his prison. It doesn't have to be yours." He nodded slowly. "I'm not going to ask you for forgiveness," he said. "I don't deserve it. And honestly, forgiveness feels cheap right now, like an easy way out. I came to say thank you. You didn't just save my life that night. Ebony, you killed the part of me that was turning into him. You broke the cycle. If you'd let me drown, I think he would have won." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small black velvet box. He hesitated before taking it like it might bite him. Inside was a bronze medal. Not my father's, a replica I'd had made engraved on the back with 3 simple words: honor, courage, commitment. "Keep it," I told him. "Boot camp is going to try to break you. The world will try to break you. When you start wondering who you are, put your hand in your pocket and remember this. Not this house, not your father's name. The home you're building inside your own chest." A single tear slid down his cheek. He wiped it away quickly, then stood straight and saluted me. I nodded. He turned and walked up the driveway toward the bus, waiting by the gate, leaving behind the mansion, the money, the pond, and the boy he used to be. I walked back to where our old F-150 sat, freshly painted forest green new tires, ready for whatever the swamp threw at us. My dad sat in the passenger seat wearing a floppy fishing hat, grinning like the world had finally given us a good hand. Smokey leaned against the bed of the truck cooler full of bait at his feet, 3-fingered hand raised in a wave. "Come on, girl," my dad called. "Catfish are biting and tide's right." I climbed in, started the engine, and drove us past the spot in the driveway where I'd once changed tires in humiliation with a whole school watching. This time, nobody was laughing. People were visiting the center, reading signs about wetland restoration and environmental justice, seeing our name on the brochures. We drove deep into the bayou windows, downwind in our faces. The water in the channels was clear again, dotted with white lilies where toxic sludge used to sit. Birds sang. Frogs hummed. The land was healing. So were we. And that's really the heart of it. The loudest bully in the room is almost always the most terrified person in the room. They build castles out of fear. Stack money on top of abuse, call it power and hope. Nobody sees the cracks. But that doesn't excuse what they do. It doesn't fix the damage. It just shows you where the rot started. Real strength isn't how hard you can hit, or how many people you can scare into silence. Real strength is standing between a dog and a rock, showing up at a police station even when the whole town thinks you're guilty, holding a rope out to the person who tried to drown you, and saying, "Grab it," when every voice inside you is screaming to walk away. So let me ask you again now that you know the whole story. If you were on that bank watching someone like Connor scream in the dark water of a pond he built with his own cruelty, would you have thrown the rope? Or would you have turned your back and let nature finish the job? And what about someone like him? A bully, an abuser, but also a victim of abuse himself. Do you think he deserved a second chance? Or should he have gone to prison right beside his father? Do you think it's fair that without that flip phone, without that ledger, without a bunch of broke veterans walking into a station together, the story would have ended with me in handcuffs and him in a private rehab somewhere, learning nothing? I really want to hear what you think. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Argue with me. Agree with me. Tell me what you would have done. Tell me about the bullies you've met. The times you stayed silent when you wish you'd spoken up. Or the times you threw someone a rope they might not have deserved. If this story made you angry, or made you see power and mercy a little differently, share it with someone who needs to hear it hit. Like so more people find it, and don't forget to subscribe. If you want more real stories like this, not fairy tales. Because the only way we fix ponds like that, in our towns, in our schools, in our families, and in our own hearts, is by dragging the monsters into the light and deciding together that we're done being prey and we're done staying quiet, and we are finally ready to say, "No more."